What if your next truly genius idea is already right here, just waiting for you to tune in and receive it? Today, I'm going to show you how the world's best tap into something bigger, which is a field of infinite ideas, insights, and solutions, and how you can too. Welcome to the Everyday Genius Show. I'm Taryn Voget, and on this episode, I'm going to show you how you can get more genius ideas almost on demand. Now, over the years, I've had a lot of people come through my Genius Lab, truly the world's best at what they do, and I've been able to deconstruct how they do it. And what I've discovered is that there is a structure to genius. People think it's all magical and mysterious, but it's not. There's a structure. And it's important to understand what that structure is because it's really going to tee up what we're going to talk about on this episode. So, what is the structure to genius? Genius is when three things come together. It's when someone's operating from their passion and their excitement. And that's the fuel for greatness. It's when they're operating from great strategy. It's the how. How are they doing what they do, and at what level are they doing it? And strategy gets better over time. The third element is what I call channeling, and that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. And channeling is when someone is able to connect into a bigger field of ideas, inspiration, or solutions and channel or pull that through into what looks like this reality. Now, when those three things come together and they come together often enough, which is passion plus great strategy plus channeling, it looks to the world like genius. But the truth is, you are already doing this at some level. You are already geniusing at some level. And by understanding each of these elements and how they work, you can take your own skills and your own genius to the next level. So, what is channeling? I've discovered in my Genius Lab that people who are really good at what they do something very consistently and repeatedly, which is that they connect into what I call the quantum field and source ideas and solutions from that place and pull it in. And it's something that we all do very intuitively. It's just we don't realize that we're doing it. It's like, do you ever take a shower or you're driving and you have a really great idea, just boop, pop in? Or you're having a lot of fun and you're just doing something you really enjoy and boop, great idea comes. Or you're in that flow state where time stops and stuff just flows through in your creation, whether you're writing or creating art or whatever it is. Those are all examples of accessing the quantum field. Now, the quantum field is not a place. The quantum field is a state. And it's a state where we are connected into something bigger than ourselves. It's kind of a place beyond the mind where we're connected into all that is, into the entirety of the universe. And you've already felt this. Like, do you ever have those moments where you had really heightened senses and you just felt super connected to something or to a moment? People and athletes talk about this a lot when they're in that zone where, time stops and they're just super connected and something really magical happens. That is accessing the quantum field state. And in that state, we have access to literally the entirety of the universe. But here's the interesting thing is that we can only pull in from the quantum field ideas or information that we can act on in that moment. And this is why the first two elements of genius are so important to channeling, which is take music, for example. If I wanted to connect into the quantum field and channel a song to create, I really couldn't do it. And here's why, because I don't have a background in music. I don't know how to structure music. I don't even know how to read music. So while that information is available to me, there's not enough inside of me to take that and do something with. So it's not useful. And yet, if you look at someone like Prince, he was an incredible artist, very skilled, practiced artist. He could literally channel songs in a session and have them all come out in a single take. And that was him having the skills and the ability and the desire and the passion connecting into the field and then just channeling pure genius through. So we need passion and we need great strategy because channeling is then what allows us to tap in and get what we need to create something really cool or to get a big idea. And the better we become, the more access to greater ideas or insights or solutions we can latch onto and pull in because we have more capacity to do something with them. So that's why when you think, oh, that person's a genius, they have the other elements. And so they're able to access that quantum field of unlimited ideas or inspiration at a higher level because they're able to do something with it because they've got great strategy, because they've got great passion. So I'll share a really fun example from my own life that illustrates this point around channeling. Many years ago, I was at a career crossroads trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I had really put the intent out that I wanted to build my own company. I wanted to do something new, something innovative, something that hadn't been done before. And I had spent a few months just like, what is it? 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 And I just couldn't come up with it. But I'd just really been thinking a lot about it. And then one day on a Saturday morning, I was driving over the Golden Gate Bridge. I lived in Sausalito and I was coaching in a psychology class on the weekends in San Francisco. And in the morning, it was a beautiful morning. I'm driving over the Golden Gate Bridge and out of nowhere, I felt this flash of light just enter into my mind. And I got the whole idea for what was at the time the Everyday Genius Institute. And I saw the name, I saw what to do, I saw how to do it, and it all came to me in a flash, just like that. And that's an example of where I wasn't thinking about anything, but I had intent and I had the ability to execute on it and I had the desire and I set all that up. And then in a moment where I wasn't thinking, I connected into the quantum field. In this case, it was really like a lightning bolt moment. It all dropped in all at once, fully formed. Now, those are really fun when those kinds of things happen, and they do on occasion. More often than not, we are channeling in more subtle ways. For example, right before I went to film this, I realized a really cool insight that I wanted to share with you in this video, and it just dropped in while I was blow drying my hair. And that's how channeling works. It's often when we're not thinking that there's space for something to drop in, or we kind of enter into a space and then boop, there's the idea. So, I'll share with you some really cool ideas from my Genius Lab to further highlight how really some of the world's best do what they do to do this consistently and repeatedly, which is get great ideas or solutions or information at the highest levels. I had a shaman in my Genius Lab, and he creates healing miracles on a regular basis for clients. And we deconstructed how he does that. And he thought it was just some magic that he performed. And trust me, it looks like magic. And yet there's always a structure behind all that. And what we discovered doing a deep dive on picking apart his strategy was that the trigger for him is when a client asks him for help. Help me heal this thing that I need in my life. And that's his signal to go. And then what he does once he gets asked a question is he says he steps out of himself. He's no longer who he is. He steps into what he calls the void and he becomes all things. And he no longer exists. He's all things. And in that state of being all things, he sees the client and exactly the issue and exactly what they need for a healing solution. And then he sees the miracle being done. And then he snaps back into his body and he's able to then execute on what he saw and what he needs to do. And by the way, what I just explained all happens in a lightning bolt moment. He had no idea he even did it until we broke it down. But that's the really cool thing about the quantum field is that they say in quantum physics that all possibilities exist and they only become real once they're witnessed. And he is probably the purest example of somebody who goes into the void, feels like he becomes all things, sees the problem, and then sees the solution. He's a witness to it. And that witnessing is what all of a sudden creates the possibility in the universe for it to happen in reality. Another really cool example of someone who is a brilliant channeler is an animal communicator. And she helps clients talk to their animals if they've got an issue or they've got questions. And in my Genius Lab, we deconstructed how she does that because she didn't really know. She just knew that she was able to do it. Her tee up is a little different. What she does is a client calls her for some help talking to their dog or their horse or their cat. And she then has the client with them and she creates what she calls a sacred space, meaning she says a prayer and an intention and she creates a sacred container. And that's her signal to herself to go into this place where you can connect with this animal and get the information that you need. And when we deconstructed how she did that, what she says she does is she creates this opening from her heart, like a doorway, almost like she said it was curtains on a stage and they open. And she walks through and she's no longer her, but she's able to be all things and then have a conversation and hear what the animal has to say. And literally, she then takes that information and channels it back to the client. And that's how she does it. A more maybe everyday example is a guy I had in my Genius Lab who is the chief innovation officer for a company. And his job is to basically create genius ideas or innovative ideas. And he does something very intuitively brilliant, which is that he schedules time on his calendar to basically do nothing. Or I say do nothing. He goes for a walk. He goes rock climbing. He goes to the gym. And he says every week he has large chunks of time to go do that. He says because for him, it's so important to have empty space. He called it that empty space so that he could just let ideas come to him. And he scheduled it very deliberately. Now, Steve Jobs talked about this quite a lot is that when he was stuck on a problem, he would just get up and go for a walk. And on that walk, where he may or may not be even thinking about the problem, the solution often just came to him. And it's kind of that where you're not thinking about it, but you're in a receiving state. And that is the main point about accessing or being in the quantum field state is that it's not a doing state, it's a receiving state, which is why it's so important to be in a receiving state or why ideas come to us when we're not thinking about anything and we're receptive, because that is a larger part of the universe being like, boop, here you go, try this one on. And we can only do that if we're open to receiving. So, one way I've discovered that a lot of people that are good at what they do it is they just allow themselves that receiving state. Now, when I was kind of deconstructing myself, I have a very intuitive ability to read somebody and see what their genius is. Now, my trigger is someone asks me, Taryn, I don't know what to do with my life. What am I good at? What's my genius? That's my trigger. And all of a sudden, I go really quiet and I just hear their soul tell me the answer. And it's always right. And so we don't always need big ceremony or big chunks of time. Sometimes it's just being really intentional in a moment where quiet, let me hear it. So there's so many ways in which we can connect into the quantum field and channel that kind of insider information through. And I'm going to share 9 ways that people can connect in and that maybe one of these will work for you. Now, the first way is one we already talked about, which is where you just zone out, but maybe you zone out deliberately. You take a longer shower, you go for a longer drive. Actually, a colleague of mine does this. He goes for long drives when he's really stressed out because it allows him time just to think. And scheduling zone out time where you're not looking at a screen or you're not doing something, but you're literally just kind of zoned out, not thinking about anything, is a great state to be in that receptive mode to receive ideas. Meditation can work too. If you're good at meditating, you can be in a receptive state. A lot of people need practice to do this, but some people are quite good at it. That's another way to just close your eyes and receive. So the first strategy is just zone out. The second way we can connect into the quantum field or channel ideas is by doing a repetitive motion. And that could be things like running or surfing or dancing, where you're really present to doing the thing and your body is very busy moving, which kind of gives your mind a chance to zone out. And in that state where the body's busy, but the mind is sort of zoned out, we can often connect into something bigger and channel really great ideas or solutions through in that state. And surfers talk about this a lot, that they'll get their best ideas when they're mid-wave. They're very present. They're very engaged in what they're doing. Their body's active. And that's when something can come through. The third strategy is one that's actually one of my personal favorites is a pattern disruptor or travel, meaning we do something to get outside of our daily routine. And travel is such a great way to do this because when we're traveling, we're often very receptive and open because we're looking at new things, we're experiencing a new place. Maybe we're on an airplane or a train or a bus and we're just not really thinking about anything. We're kind of zoning out, just looking at the scenery. And that is a great state to be in when we're out of our normal routine and we're just receptive because we're in a new environment. Often great ideas come in that state. Now, J.K. Rowling is a great example of this. She got the idea for Harry Potter when she was on a train ride. And she didn't have a pen or a paper, but the idea just popped into her head on a train ride. And she spent the rest of the train ride thinking about the idea and how the characters would work. And that was when Harry Potter was born, was on a train. The fourth strategy is creative immersion, meaning that we're immersed in doing something creative like writing or painting or creating music or building something. We're creating something. And in that state, we're so present to the creation that we can get into a flow state. And a flow state is where a lot can come through because we're open, we're receptive, and we're allowing something to flow through us in our creation that can be quite brilliant. Michael Crichton the famous author, talks about this is that when he was writing, he said he would be in such a flow that he didn't even know what was going to happen with the characters. He literally just documented it like he was watching a documentary of what was going on, and he would just write what he saw. It was an excellent example of being in a flow state and receiving and then just writing what he received. The fifth way of connecting into the quantum field or channeling something really cool through is by having some kind of ritual or ceremony or even an intention. And the animal communicator I talked about earlier has a very specific ceremony that she walks through. She reads a prayer, she creates the sacred space, and that's her way of telling her brain, okay, go connect in. But a lot of times people have much smaller rituals. They go to sit at their desk and they've got their candle and they've got their tea and they've got their computer just right. And that tells their brain, okay, go. And maybe they're writing or working on a project. So it doesn't necessarily matter what the ritual is. I remember Alberto Tomba, who was a skier, God, years and years ago in the Olympics. One of his rituals was at the top of the ski gate, he would chug an espresso drink. And I think that ritual was his way of saying, okay, go and go be powerful. So sometimes these rituals are fun and they're just whatever works for you. But they're powerful because what that does is it tells the mind and the body and the spirit, okay, go time. The sixth one is a fun one, which is being in a state of play or laughter or joy. Because when we're in that state, we're in a very open and receptive mode, and our emotions get heightened and our energy levels get heightened. And from that place, we're able to connect into the quantum field in a way that allows us then to connect into ideas that are also at a much higher level of vibration or joy or excitement. So I remember Albert Einstein talking about this, is that when he was stuck on a physics problem, he would get out his violin and play his violin. He found a lot of joy in playing the violin. And that was his way of getting into a joyful place. And often then the ideas or the solution would come to him. I read a fascinating study recently that Nobel laureates, something like 80% of Nobel laureates have a creative pursuit that they love doing. They are into music or dance or painting or writing or something. And that there was a much higher degree of them doing that than people that were not Nobel laureates that were also in the same field. And I think that's really a strategy of genius that they had, which was do something creative, get in a happy, joyful place, because then better ideas just drop in and come to you. The seventh one is interesting. It's accessing the quantum field or channeling from the dream state or the hypnagogic state, which is that state between sleep and awake, that twilight state. And it's where you're not fully awake and your mind is just kind of open to receiving information. Thomas Edison and Salvador Dali were well known for trying to access ideas in those two states. And there's a lot of strategies people use to try to do it, but they had their own, they were a little quirky. But oftentimes, if we can keep a pen and paper by our bed and we wake up before we're fully awake and we just write down whatever's on our mind right then, that's often when some really good ideas or inspiration or solutions drop in and come through. Back to the innovation person I was talking about, he actually does this. He says first, when he first wakes up, he tries to remember what he dreamt about because he says the solutions often come to him in his dreams. I thought that was really interesting. The eighth one is such a great one. It's around accessing the quantum or channeling from a deep place of connection with nature. Now, Nikola Tesla talked a lot about this, that when he was stuck on a problem, he would go and he would just walk the fields and he'd be in nature. And that's often when ideas or solutions would come to him. I think what happens is that nature is the ultimate genius. It's the perfection of nature is just so spectacular. And when we're out in nature, we attune to the same frequency of that genius as nature. And that allows us in a attuned state with nature for us to then access something bigger and get more genius ideas. So sometimes the simplest thing to do is go for a hike or go out in nature. And often things just drop right in. I'm sure you've had this experience. Most people have. And the last one is using sound or music frequencies to get into an elevated state for ideas or inspiration or flow. And a lot of artists or writers talk about this, that they put on the right music that gets them in the right state that allows them to snap in and channel something through them. And so music is a powerful tool for that because the frequency of the music allows us to raise our frequency to that. And that's when at a higher vibrational state, we can access more and allow more to come through us. So those are 9 examples of how we can get into the quantum state and channel information or big ideas through. And maybe you even have your own way of doing it. And if you do, put it in the comments. I would love to hear. And I'm sure that everyone watching would love to see what you do because maybe it's what they need to get their next big genius idea. Thank you, as always, for letting me share my greatest passion and joy with you, which is sharing this information and helping you on your journey to greater and greater genius. Hit the subscribe button and get notified of when the next episode drops. And I look forward to continuing our conversation about your genius on the next episode.